Today we're going to look at a 1977 Maserati Khamsin. Not a lot is known about them. They are getting better known. It was 430 made. It was designed by Bertone. It was Bertone's show car in 1970 or 71. Maybe it was 72. 73 it became a Maserati, and it was on the stand of Maserati as the Khamsin. This was during, and it was designed by Gandini, House of Bertone. So many styling cues that Bertone used. I think the basis for the car started, the mule was an Espada, but they ultimately made a custom chassis for it. It carries the 4.9 double overhead cam dry sump Maserati V8 with 4 twin throat Webers. This has a 5-speed, approximately 35,000 miles on it. These were made from, I think it was 74, so it was a 73 Bertone car, or Maserati car, and start, I think, delivery in 74, 75. This is a 77, so during this period of time was when Citroën had come to the rescue of Maserati. Maserati had been falling by the wayside for a while, but they had made this car, and then they made the Bora and the Merak, and people weren't too happy about it because it was rear drive, and they really wanted a front engine rear drive GT. So they made this thing unbeknownst to them. You had the Suez fuel crisis, the fuel crisis of the 70s, late 70s, and it was an extremely expensive car at the time, and I don't think they sold anywhere near as many as they thought they would. So this car is, as I said, a 5-speed. Really fantastic car. I mean, it's got some great lines. Don't know what the best angle for it as, but I see some Alfa, I see some, all kinds of Ferrari, Daytona. I see a bunch of different influences in the car, the biggest of which was this big rear glass, which Ralph Nader, Nader's Raiders, totally debauched this thing with this big diving board bumper. It certainly can be upgraded to European spec, very easily done. I think you just have to, reposition the tail lights, the back glass. Then this is glass. It gets a plexiglass piece, and the lights go into the tail. The muffler moves up, and then there's a small bumper where the tail lights are now. But it really improves the looks of it. It's got great waistline, great angles. It kind of just sweeps. I mean, it was really kind of one of the ultimate wedge cars. Bertone and Gandini, he went on to design the Kunta, was another one of his famous designs. He did the Renault R Turbo, which I have. It's another great design adaptation. So Campagnolo wheels, independent suspension all the way around. It was the first Maserati to have complete independent suspension. The rear suspension actually rides in a cradle, which is pretty extensive. It's got dual shocks in the rear, single shocks in the front, disc brakes all the way around. As I said, a Geartrag 5-speed, or is it CF? I'm not really sure, but it's a 5-speed. And then it has the Citroën hydraulics, and the hydraulics work the master cylinder brakes. They work the clutch, they work the steering rack, they actually raise and lower the headlight pods, and then they raise and lower the driver's seat that is also a hydraulically assisted. It has a closed loop 2,700 pound braking system on it, charged with nitrogen from a main accumulator, and then 2 accumulators that store vacuum as you run. So one of the strange things about these cars is that they really don't have any brakes until they're actually running. So that has caused some issues over the years. But self-centering steering, if you let go of your hands in the middle of a turn, it'll automatically go straight. So you certainly want to keep your hands on the wheel. Extremely light clutch, as opposed to a lot of supercars of this era. It was rated by Road and Track as one of the nicest handling road GTs, and I guess that was in the early 80s. But it certainly has a lot to offer. Being that there was only 430 made, there was 150 came to the United States. This is one. This was sold at Grossman Motors in Nyack, New York, and it's had 2 other owners before me. They had right-hand drive, and then they had a European version and a Japanese version, but all totaled only 430 copies, of which maybe 30 or 40, maybe 50 have been destroyed. I doubt that many, but not that many. Of the 130 cars, 150 cars that came to the United States, there's probably maybe 20 left. They've been slowly taken across the pond, where they're valued much more than they are here. So it's full complement of gauges. Obviously the back trunk area, it's a big, huge trunk, a lot of glass area. Does not have the original stereo in it, but basically a full complement of gauges, starting with the fuel, then the tachometer, oil pressure, water temperature, and then your main speedometer. And then in the middle there is something that's very important. It's your hydraulic monitoring. So if that stop brake failure comes on, that means that you are losing hydraulic fluid. So I guess the park means parking brake and fasten seatbelts, pretty obvious. The headlight switches are right here. And this is actually a hydraulic switch. It's fed by a main hydraulic pump that works off the back of the water pump, and that creates most of the pressure. And fully adjustable steering wheel. This was an American version with the padded hub. The other ones didn't have that. Obviously there's your 5-speed with down to the left Maserati, as they always have had. And there's a stereo underneath that kind of grill looking thing. It makes it look like there's another air grill there. Then you have oil temperature, and then your battery, and then your clock. And those clocks, I don't know why they always fade like that. Headlight switches, hazards, a very complicated air conditioning system, so I've never really actually worked that out. The wipers, that's the antenna up and down, and then there's a backup light switch that if for some reason the lights don't come on, that's your switch. It has a nice glove box. Not a lot of storage other than that. It has a small back seat, which I don't think you can put too much back there. I have my rearview mirror sitting there right now, so it gives you an idea of how small it is. But, ashtray, you don't even find ashtrays in cars anymore. But really, really a cute little car. There's the choke right down there to the right of the passenger, the driver's thing. So obviously no switches on the doors at all, but there is a crank. Here's a crank, there's a manual crank that you could manually crank out the windows if for some reason there was an electric failure. The dash itself is Alcantara, and then the rest of the car is all leather. The headliner is pretty funky, pretty much original, I guess. I've never had these down, sun visors. But I'm missing the rearview mirror. It just fell off. It's sitting back there someplace. It has twin gas tanks. So evidently the car was designed, the outside features of the car were designed, and then the engine was adapted to it. One of the facts that people think is a fact, but is not, is that Maserati was never forced by Citroën, since they were the parent company, to take up any of the Citroën technological advances as far as hydraulics or any other systems that Citroën had. Alfieri, which is one of the Maserati's brothers, was very much in favor of this, and he thought it was a world-class braking system, and for that reason, that's why it was adapted into the car. So basically the car is designed, and then the running gear is adapted to the car, meaning that, you know, there's a funky gas tank right there behind the gas tank filler, which is right here. There's a small auxiliary tank that goes into the corner of the quarter panel, and it goes down about halfway to the swage line, beyond the swage line. And then underneath the center, where you would think that your spare tire would be, there's another large gas tank there. So I think it holds about 20 gallons. Little known fact, the actual Maserati Khamsin is a mid-engine car. The engine is actually mounted behind the center line of the front wheel. So there's a big V8 there that begins just beyond those grills and goes back into the firewall, up into the front here. There's a little panel down below. You can just see it right down there. That's where the spare tire is, and the spare tire basically rides in the front of the car. And then there's a whole lot of stuff in there. The power steering pump and the water pump all work together, as does the AC pump. They're all mounted together. It's kind of like a little complicated thing, but probably the braking system is the most misunderstood. The Citroën high-pressure braking system, it takes maybe 1 inch movement of the wheel, of the brake pedal, to bring you to a stop from 150 miles an hour. It's very, very slight, and if you're not used to it, you can put yourself right into the windshield pretty quickly. Fixed side light, power windows, back does not open. The back windows do not open. These are fake air vents. I don't know why. I think there was a prototype actually had these air vents were actually were operational. But it really has some beautiful lines, you know, and you can see where they stole a lot of this stuff over the years too. Like I can see satellite and charger, and you know, a lot of the styles that they took. You know, just these shapes is pretty cool. I think there's 16-inch wheels. That was the stock wheels, Cromodoro. I don't know if they're magnesium, but they're pretty darn big, I can tell you that. And that's it. So this one is 1,196 of 340 or 430. So it was kind of at the end of the run of the Americans, and I'm not exactly sure, but I have heard that it was at the end of the run. But in Europe, they continued to make these cars. In 1977, they only made 69 Khamsins. So entire worldwide production was 69. So you talk about, you know, exclusivity of production numbers. It's pretty rarefied, and you know, quite a few of them were destroyed over the years. The tin worm didn't treat the Italian metal too well, and evidently anywhere that you didn't see, Maserati didn't feel he needed to paint. So all the inside rockers and, you know, inner sills and things like that were very susceptible to rust. We've seen quite a few very, very rusty Khamsins over the years, but this one seems to have survived. This was originally a silver car. It was painted sometime in the 80s, and basically has carried this paint for quite some time. So they don't have, this one has not been driven that much. We've just recommissioned it, getting all the systems running. We're working on the final systems now, but really quite an experience. It really is just a two-passenger car. I mean, it was considered a GT, but back seats are for show purposes only, and unless you got a small dog or a package, some shopping, you can't carry too much in the back seat. But it does have a large luggage compartment. There was an excluder where you could pull it closed so people couldn't see what was back there. Then there have been cars also that had the back glass panel closed in because they thought it was a safety hazard, people stealing things. Wouldn't be what I would do in any event. So that's it. 77 Khamsin, one of 430 that were produced. One of very few still in the United States, and I don't claim to be an expert. I've only known what I've read. Ferrari Chat has a huge Maserati Khamsin chat board, and most of what I've learned from on there, or just talking to some of the people on the boards, and I'll leave it open to you. But definitely a very exciting car. If you get a chance to see one, they certainly are getting rarer by the day, especially here in the United States. This car is a miles-per-hour car. It was always a 5-speed. People have switched them from automatics to 5-speed. I think it's a 4-speed automatic or a 5-speed. But this car basically is the way it originally came, other than the paint being done. I hope you've enjoyed it.